you can't miss something or someone that's always there, that's always around, right? Absence, I mean, the saying is absence makes the heart grow fonder. And as I'm sure you've seen in your work, it really is often true.
Hi, this is Bob Grant at Relationship Headquarters, and today I am thrilled to have with us who's known as Breakup Brad. I've known him for years. We are in the same space. He has a real care and a concern for women and relationships in general. So, Brad, it's wonderful to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite, Bob. I appreciate it.
So, I know we've got some questions to go through, and I remember the time when you and I were at a meeting, and it was after all the things that we had done. I remember we just were able to free flow about stuff. And what I really liked was how curious you were about things. And I think you take that probably into what you do as well. So I've got some questions, but can you first sort of tell everyone what you do, who you are? Some people have heard of you, perhaps some haven't.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So my name's Brad Browning, aka Breakup Brad. A lot of people know me as Breakup Brad. And I've been primarily a breakup coach for the past 15 years or so. I also do some marriage coaching, just general relationship coaching, but primarily breakups, both male and female. And I've been doing that for about 15 years. I have a couple of best-selling training programs online, as well as I offer one-on-one coaching to breakup and marriage clients. And some of your viewers may recognize me from my YouTube channel, just Brad Browning is the YouTube handle. And I have been putting videos out there for about 12 years, and it's gotten quite popular over the years. So that's how most people know me.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. So let me ask a few questions because I'm sure you've heard lots of stories. And let me start with one. I've talked with a lot of women, and they tell me that when there's a breakup, fine, I just need to ignore the guy, leave him alone, and he'll come back. And I kind of catch my breath when they say that because there may be some truth to that. But what do you start off with when someone's gone through a breakup? Is there an initial thing you advise them on? Is there maybe a common question or fear that you usually look for or want to address first off with them, especially if it's just happened?
Well, generally, when I get a new coaching client, as a breakup coaching client, I think typically the first thing I'd try to do is get an understanding of why the breakup happened, what the fundamental problems in the relationship were. And that's actually harder to do than it may seem, because you're only sort of getting one side of the story. And a lot of times people have a convoluted view of what really happened, or certainly a view that their ex wouldn't agree with. But yeah, generally I just start by trying to understand the situation and also understand what's happened since the breakup, because a lot of people will come to me after they've already tried on their own to either move on or get their ex back, depending on what they want. And so they may have done some damage already, or they may be in a good position, and I just try to sort out where they're at and what the next steps would be. As far as actually just leaving your ex alone and waiting for them, I really do. I am a big proponent of no contact generally, but no contact, of course, is just sort of one piece of a bigger strategy after a breakup, and it is an important one, but it's not the only one. I would say in most situations, a period of no contact is generally advisable, whether you want to get over your ex or you want them back.
I know what I found is that folks, when they've done that, I like what you said about sometimes they've done damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've addressed this, but the idea of sometimes actually doing something can make stuff worse than
Absolutely.
just, absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
Because it feels like I hear people say, I've got to do something, just
Mm-hmm.
got to do something.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I'm assuming you hear that as well.
All the time. And the reality is, I would say more often than not, actively trying to do things to get your ex back is probably generally a bad idea. And a lot of the time, doing anything is worse than doing nothing. So that is part of no contact. But I mean, I think one of the challenges for people is sort of your natural instincts after a breakup, or when you want someone back that you've lost, is to do basically all of the wrong things, all things that are going to push them further away. That's the natural instinct for people. So it does sometimes take an outside perspective, such as mine or yours, to get people to understand that they need to fight those urges to beg and plead their ex or send them flowers or whatever it is. Because those are the things that people feel like they should be doing. And by going no contact, they feel like they're doing nothing, and they're just allowing their ex time and space to get over them. And I really think it's essentially the opposite is the truth.
And so I hear how counterintuitive that must feel to someone,
100%.
versus, just if I don't do something, he's just going to run away or she's just
Exactly.
going to leave me.
And it's an understandable fear. I totally understand.
So that actually sounds kind of normal for you when someone says that.
Absolutely. I would say that's a very common reaction. And it does often take some selling on my part to get people to buy into no contact. And the reality is a lot of people think about no contact or just sort of a passive approach as being a waste of time, or that you're not actively trying to do something, so therefore they're slipping further away. But I would argue most of the time it's actually the opposite. I mean, you can't miss something or someone that's always there, that's always around, right? Absence. I mean, the saying is absence makes the heart grow fonder. And as I'm sure you've seen in your work, it really is often true.
Let me ask you this. So sometimes women come to me complaining that a man they're dating suddenly seemed to lose interest and grows cold.
Yeah.
How, when they ask you this, how can they reignite the spark, make a man sort of re-engaged when they're going through that?
Well, I mean, that's probably a question that I imagine you get a lot as well. I mean, this is not necessarily my area of expertise, but I do see it quite often. I would say, go use the scarcity principle, right? Psychologists say that people value things more when they feel like they might lose them. So, you don't want to chase. You want to pull back a little bit. You want to mirror his energy and sort of match his level of engagement, but, slowly increase the warmth to sort of pull him back in. And again, psychologists seem to suggest that this kind of mirroring does help to create connection. And of course, you can also do things like, use positive nostalgia to bring up a romantic memory or something, just planting little sort of seeds of romance there. And of course, flirting, teasing, just all the things you do early in a relationship anyways.
Yes, I hear you say things that someone would probably naturally do, and that it's not a one size fits all. That just if you just do
Absolutely.
this one thing, everything is resolved.
Totally. Well, I mean, we're all different. Every man is different. Every woman is different. And so there is no one size fits all solution. But I think there are general principles, that most women can use that can at least, improve the situation or stop the downward spiral or the loss of connection.
And when you do that with a client, if you're working with someone, do you sort of start with a base or an idea and then sort of ask questions around that? Or do you just have like one general set of piece of advice you just kind of slap on with everyone and kind of make it fit?
A good question. I think it depends on the question I'm being asked. I mean, there's principles that I sort of universally advocate for with my clients, but it really does depend on the situation. And sometimes, a client will come to me and say, this is my situation. And I can tell from what they're telling me and the stories they're telling me that they don't have a good read on what the actual issues are or what their partner is really feeling. And so in that case, sometimes I need to sort of say, well, yeah, I understand, I hear what you're saying, but I think the real core issues here are, blank. So you need to go in a different direction. And most of the time I would say people sort of, it helps them to get an outside perspective and to really see that maybe their assumptions are not correct. And sometimes those situations do need sort of a different approach. Sometimes there is a value to chasing a guy or value to pulling back completely, depending on the situation.
With the breakups that you see, is there a general pattern that you see, or is there like a more likely cause or things that you see primarily, or is it random or?
That's a really good question. And it's one that I think about a lot because early on in my breakup coaching, I used to go back and look at my client history and just sort of try to calculate and do the math on, what was the most common cause or what were the things that clients kept saying over and over again, regardless of the situation they were in. There's a lot of things that are common. I would say that it all breaks down fundamentally for me to a loss of attraction, really. And I don't mean just physical or sexual attraction. I just mean at the end of the day, love is it's an emotional emotion. It's the ultimate emotion. And if somebody feels sufficiently attracted to someone, that's always going to trump rational or logical reasons why they think that breaking up is appropriate. So really, if there is that fundamental level of natural organic attraction between you and your partner, your ex, that's always going to overcome, practical or logical reasons that somebody has to not be in a relationship anymore. That all being said, of course, there are specific things that can lead them to that position where they've been dumped or where they've fallen out with a partner or an ex. For women, I would say just general controlling behavior, neediness, clinginess, smothering tends to be one of the most common ones. I'm sure you see that quite a bit. And I don't mean to be patronizing when I say that, because often women are doing this out of good intentions or because they really love the man. And they don't recognize that sometimes their behavior is controlling, or at least is coming across as controlling to their partner. And that can be one of the big ones, like complacency, boredom, taking one another for granted, just incompatible goals, hobbies, things like that. Those are all common things. Although usually, most situations, it's more than one single issue that leads to a breakup. It's a combination of things over time, and that leads to that loss of attraction. And then that attraction is no longer sufficient to overcome those underlying problems. I don't know if that tracks
I
with
like
what you've seen
how
with your
you frame
clients.
that, because what I heard from that was there's a way you describe attraction was that's sort of the core issue versus the
Mhm.
symptoms of these other things. And the
Exactly.
symptoms can be real problems, like if you say nagging or
100%.
complaining or ignoring,
Yep.
but that core thing. And I haven't heard it described quite that way, but I love it's simple to see. And maybe that sometimes I wonder is what causes folks to think there's just a simple answer. Um, is there something I can say? There's what can I say to get them to come back? What can I say which might address the symptom, but it doesn't address the problem that's led to it. At least that's what I think
Exactly.
I'm hearing.
Exactly. And I don't know how you feel about this. I'd actually be interested to hear your take. But one of the things that I've advocated for, in generally speaking, is the idea that communication, you can't really necessarily talk your way out of problems, especially after a breakup's already happened.
Mhm.
So, you've already been dumped, or maybe it was mutual. The temptation is to sort of sit down with your ex or your partner and say, here's what happened. Here's where we went wrong. Here's what I think, you did wrong. I did wrong. Here's what we could do differently if we got back together. That is, unfortunately, in my experience, almost always just going to make the problems worse. Because really, all it does is focus the attention on those problems.
Mm.
So really, I think what's more important is just actually spending quality time with your ex or your partner if you want to actually rebuild that connection, rather than trying to talk your way out of it, which seems like, again, one of the natural instincts and one of the common pieces of advice. Communication is key, as I'm sure you've heard. And that is true to an extent, but not necessarily after a breakup. It can often be negative. I don't know if that answers your
No,
question, but
no, it does. I like it because you actually spend more time with breakups than I do. So just hearing you since you're around this so much, and I've seen that, but I haven't heard it described the way you're describing it. That just talking your way out of it. Because I know back when I would have people in my office, they'd come in to talk, but
Mhm.
most of that was just like keeping them from killing each other,
Right, right.
metaphorically, and because they were so, and the more they would talk, it was like acid would come out.
Exactly. Yeah.
And but I like the idea of spending time, that it's beyond just words, talking it out. I've got 16-year-old boys, and they still do this. They'll do something, and they want to talk their way out of it,
Yeah.
as though there's an explanation that makes
Exactly.
what you did okay to avoid the
Exactly.
consequence. Or no, you're going to find out. Federals don't know. Fred has a young children, excuse me, and so you will find this out as they get older. But I hear that same thing what you're talking about. Can we just talk and make it better? Sometimes I wonder if that isn't what you're saying, a way of actually avoiding the problem. So
I
I can
mean,
talk
I
about
don't know if
stuff.
it's yeah, yeah. I mean, essentially, it is avoiding the problem. It's not so much I do think that when a problem first arises in a relationship, communication is critical. You want to try and solve it on the spot with communication, being honest with one another. Um, but when that fails, or when you've done that 10 times, or when it leads to a breakup and that's still an issue, at that point, then I feel, talking about it is just going to focus both parties' attention on the problem. And eventually, the interactions between you and your ex, or you and your partner, are just going to end up being drama, bickering, focusing on problems, and the serious talks and all that stuff. And really, what makes people want to be together, be with one another, be in a relationship, is the quality stuff. The positives, like spending time together, the intimacy, the romance, all that kind of thing. That's what really makes people want to be in a relationship. So if you want to be in a relationship with somebody, whether that's your ex or someone new, those are the things that are going to make them want to be with you and stay with you.
Those core things, whether it's your ex or someone new, are going to be
Exactly.
applicable.
Exactly.
So
I think so.
if someone's in that relationship and they're just banging heads, or they really want it, I'm thinking of a couple people now in our Facebook group, and they really care about the person, the guy, but they're not sure. Do I work on this because I don't want to be weak, or is it time to move on? Do you have any guidelines, or is there something that you tell folks of how should they know whether it's worth trying to save versus it's just time to cut my losses?
That's a tough one. I'm sure you feel the same way that, we're not really in a position to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't do. It really comes down to their own desires. And I think your gut instinct is the most reliable tool you have in deciding that for yourself. At the same time, at least after a breakup, one of the things a lot of my clients sort of seem to struggle with is the idea that they might miss not necessarily their specific ex or that person that they're in a relationship or were in a relationship with, rather than just sort of missing being in a relationship and all the benefits that come with that. And so I try to ask my clients, really look inside yourself and decide whether this is about a specific person that you want to still be with, or whether this is about, I just don't want to let go of being in a relationship. I don't want to go through the process of finding somebody new. Because I think if really you're really head over heels for a specific person, if this is about them and you need to be with them, then it's worth, fighting for that relationship and pursuing, trying to have a future together. Whereas on the other hand, if you decide, I would be happy with somebody else who I could be equally happy with, that probably suggests that it's maybe not worth fighting for, or at least not for a long time or hard, if that makes any sense.
No, that because I hear what you're saying is you help them actually sort of drill down to find out how much of this is just I want to be in a relationship versus
Totally.
I really want to be with this person.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, you probably see this in some of your clients who have been in long-term relationships, and they just sort of, they become so accustomed to life in a relationship and with somebody. So, you spend your weekends, your evenings with this person. You basically can no longer fathom life without them. So it's scary to think, well, I might have to let go of this and find somebody new. But, sometimes you just get so complacent and you really end up only wanting to be in the relationship more than wanting to be in a relationship with that person. And it can be a big, scary leap to take, to decide this isn't working. I can find somebody who's going to be more compatible and I should let go. And I do say that. Even though a lot of my clients want to get their ex back, sometimes there are situations where it's better to jump into the unknown world of being single and not latch yourself to a relationship that isn't working for long term.
And that helping them to just sort of walk through that. I'm assuming that's one of the benefits of having a coach and having someone to talk that out without having to try to figure that out in their head and just going back and forth.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, one of the biggest value pieces they get from working with me and probably other coaches like yourself as well is just hearing from somebody who has a completely detached perspective, who doesn't, I'm not friends with my clients. I don't know their relationship, their history. I'm not one of their family member, because all those people, of course, are giving them advice too and telling them, oh, here's what you should do. And sometimes just having an outside perspective from somebody who sees this all the time can be really valuable in itself. Just helping people to take a step back and, look at what the real issues are and understand themselves through having somebody else sort of ask questions and poke holes in what they're thinking.
When you said that, my father was a physician and my mom was a nurse, and I was growing up and I said, Dad, how come you don't see mom as a patient? He said, because I'm her husband. And he
Right,
said, I don't want
exactly.
to have to make that life or death decision. I don't want to have to. So she got her own doctor. Not that he couldn't do it. It's just he understood that he couldn't be objective should an emergency
100%.
happen. I think that
100%.
reminds me of that, what you're talking about. I think with family members, I think their intention is good, but they're loyal to the person.
Absolutely.
And I'm mad at him because he or she broke up with you, and then you get back together. I'm still mad at him. I'm still
Yeah,
going to hold that against them. I hear that all the time. Folks,
totally.
friends mean well, but then they're like, "Hey, be careful." And I usually tell them, okay, "Let's just be careful who we talk to, because
Yeah,
remember, they're loyal to protecting you, not necessarily getting you back together."
exactly. And no one really has the full picture the way you do. They don't see all the private, intimate parts of the relationship. They don't know, the ins and outs, and so they're not really in a position to make a statement like you should leave, you should stay, you should fight to get them back, because they don't really know the full story. Really, only you understand the full picture. And so sometimes, yeah, advice or opinions from family and friends can actually be, in my opinion, counterproductive, because they can push people in a certain direction without really knowing the full story. Even if it, as you said, it's
Yeah,
almost always well intentioned.
yeah, well intended, and it usually I find makes them. I'm not ragging on family members, but it makes them feel better.
Yeah,
Is that,
absolutely.
wow, I stood up for them. Well, that may not have been the best thing to do, but it
Mhm.
felt better. So
Yeah,
let's
totally.
take this then. There's a woman, she's struggling with a recent breakup, and she feels like she's stuck, and she's gone back and forth. Is there, I'm thinking of someone specific. It looks to me, obviously, I wouldn't go back with this guy. I really wouldn't go back with him. But yet she really wants to. How far do you indulge is not the right word. Is that really her decision in the sense of I'll listen and listen and listen, we listen until she comes to it? Are there times to intervene with her and say, look, you need to see this? I'm sure that's situation by situation, but I've known some folks that never give advice and like never.
Yeah, I think I probably fall somewhere in the middle on that one. I do think it's important not to make decisions or lead people down a certain path that maybe intentionally. I like to just ask questions and have my client actually ask themselves questions and try to just sort of um, look within and ask themselves questions that can help them come to the realization that maybe it's not right to get back with this person. I think that the decision has to come from within, but as a coach, I can help people sort of figure out the real answer to that question, whether it's worth staying or leaving. I certainly am. There's plenty of occasions and probably almost on a daily basis where I will just flat out say to people, I don't think you should, given everything you've told me, I don't think this is a relationship worth pursuing. And sometimes it's, to be frank, it's kind of sad sometimes, the how much people want to save relationships that clearly are so deeply flawed they should just let go. But it's hard, and I get that.
But I hear you actually being willing to put the client's needs ahead of whether your comfort level, if that may be the wise thing to do is to suggest to take a hard look, even though it's uncomfortable. I
Absolutely,
mean,
absolutely. And one of the things that I always add is, as a sort of a disclaimer, is you can move on from your ex. You can decide that, okay, I'm not going to pursue this further. And you don't have to close the door to reconciliation down the road, or, if things change with that person and they start to warm up and make an effort to reconnect, and you see problems, you see progress on some of the problems that led to a breakup, you've never really closed the door on getting back with that person or saving that relationship down the road just because you decide to move on. So I try to get people to sort of accept that things are not looking good right now, and this is probably not something you should pursue and try to save. But hey, there's no reason why, just because you decide to move on now and focus on that, it doesn't mean you can't get them back eventually, or that you've shut that door, if that makes sense.
no, it does because, and I like what your idea is that what the choice I make right now doesn't mean I'm tied to it for the rest of my
Exactly.
life. Who knows, something may happen, but for now, what's the wise thing to do?
Right, exactly. And I'm happy to give my opinion on that and say, it doesn't sound to me like this is the kind of relationship you should be fighting for. But hey, who knows? Maybe things will change down the road, and you can do a full circle on that. Of course, I will also say there are situations where I would say, without any caveats, don't go back with this person. Abuse, emotional abuse, just those kinds of situations where it's clear that people should absolutely get out and never look back. Thankfully, I think that's pretty rare. At least
Mhm.
it's been my experience. I don't know about you, if that's hopefully a fairly rare
No, I
situation,
agree. I think that is more rare.
which is
I
good.
mean, it doesn't, at least for me, it doesn't happen a lot for me either.
Yeah, good.
So, and you've alluded to this, but can a breakup ever be a good thing?
Absolutely. I think 100%. And sometimes I get some pushback, especially on YouTube in the comments. People will say, your ex is your ex for a reason, and blah 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 blah. And I would push back on that idea that there are lots of breakups that happen for the wrong reasons, and lots of relationships that are in crisis but should and could be saved. But at the same time, there are also situations where I'm happy to tell somebody you shouldn't get back together. Yeah.
Right. So, well, thanks for sharing this. And so before we close,
Before we close, can I ask you a question, Bob? Because I would really like your
sure.
opinion on something, and I think your viewers and listeners would be interested in hearing. Um, I don't know if you're on YouTube a lot, but a lot of the relationship advice channels and coaches and counselors, lately have focused a lot on attachment styles and put a lot of stock in attachment styles and just sort of their importance and influence when it comes to relationship dynamics. And I have started to make videos on things like avoiding exes and just how attachment styles play into things. But I'm curious. I personally feel that sometimes people overstate the importance or maybe put too much stock in what that really means for their relationships and their daily life. And I'd be interested to hear what you think of using attachment styles and how important they are to relationship dynamics. And
Yeah, that's interesting because we didn't plan this question, but I've been thinking the same thing. So my background as a therapist, I mean, attachment styles have been around for quite a while. It comes from object
Mhm.
relations theory, and you can go as deep as you want to. And my take with yours, what I tell women is, I say, ladies, I said, most all of you are anxious attachment because women are more anxious than men. I said, I'm generalizing. So, but if you need a label to give you something to fix, and it's not that it's a bad thing, but and I think that's what you're saying is, I don't like the idea of boxes and I don't like the idea of problems being, here's my problem. Well, I'm sure there's layers. And I think that's what I picked up on earlier when you were talking about, the real problem versus the symptoms. And
Yeah,
let's look at all this stuff. Let's just don't go with the thing you think. And so I think it's helpful, like any tool, as a starting place. But most men are avoidant attachment in the sense that men tend to avoid stuff. I mean, I'm generalizing, but
Mhm.
and you can go deeper into it, but it's not like a personality disorder. Now, someone's
Right, exactly.
narcissistic,
Yeah.
okay, that's different.
Hmm.
There's a
Hmm.
huge, but I picked, I think it's not trying to rag on people that do this. It's better you do it than not. I don't think that's the end all be all because even with a label, okay, well, there's probably something different you're going to have to do than someone else, which I think gets to like the work you do. Breakup sounds so easy. Just fix a breakup. What's one reason I wanted to have you on? Oh, just he's got the magic things to say. No, is guaranteed as long as Brad has done this, you can't get away with just giving someone three sentences, or do
Yeah,
that. You won't last. People won't
yeah,
come back
totally.
to you. So I view that in the same vein that it's helpful, but I think it's similar to the just lean back and ignore the guy. A lot of good in that, but that's not all that's going to save
It's
your
not all of
relationship.
it. Yeah, no, totally. Sometimes I also wonder if people want to attribute a certain attachment style, like especially avoidant, to their ex or to their partner, to try to deflect some of the responsibility for the problems in the relationship on that aspect of their partner or whatever. Saying, well, they're avoidant, and so therefore, they're always going to be like this, and so I need to do this, and it can be, I think, maybe a
Yeah.
crutch for people to sort of understand what's going wrong.
Yes, and then I mean, the ones that really teach it, in fairness to them, they don't teach that.
No, yeah,
They're like, stop using this as a
totally.
crutch. But you're right as you're saying that. I'm thinking of some of the people in our group that, well, my boyfriend is this, and part of me is like you, like, I don't say so. I know better than to say so what.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
whole part
yeah.
is like, oh, what
Right,
are we going to do about it? That's great. Your
right.
boyfriend wears yellow. Awesome. I'm not sure what that's got to do because it
Exactly.
minimizes being rude or bad manners or being cruel, or because those things, even someone narcissistic, as bad as that is, we still don't give them a pass for bad behavior.
No,
We have a definition for it, but that's still bad behavior. That cheating is
totally.
still cheating, and threatening is
Exactly.
still threatening. And in the same way with this, and that may be his label, but a lot of those things I still find as adults are things we choose to reinforce or we choose to unbundle. And it
Mhm.
may be harder for some folks. Like, some relationships are harder to salvage than others. Okay, they're just harder. This
Yeah,
is what you want.
totally.
Who cares if yours is harder? But let's go.
Totally.
And I'm not a big believer in my fate is decided by a label. I just,
I totally agree. And I think your viewers should always use caution when somebody makes very concrete statements without any nuance. Like, if your boyfriend is a fearful avoidant, do X. That's a slippery slope and a dangerous road. So, you know, get multiple opinions, do more research, and don't assume that there's a single fix just because you've diagnosed your partner with narcissism or avoidance or whatever it is.
yeah, narcissism is another big one. I was getting, they were
Absolutely.
all do this. I finally did a post. I'm like, ladies, gentlemen, Narcissistic means something very specific. It doesn't mean
It,
he's a jerk. It
no,
doesn't, but please stop with the narcissistic. You drive me nuts. That's not,
totally.
you're just throwing that around. No, that's a pet peeve of mine too. And not to be hyper picky about it, it's just that words have meaning and diagnosis has specific things so that we can fix it and drill down. You're right. The diagnosis is not meant to be something to clap my head and say, oh, well, it didn't work out. That's not the purpose of a label. It's
Totally.
actually to unbundle something.
Nor is it to devolve all the blame or the responsibility on to somebody else
Yes.
because of their narcissism or their avoidant tendencies or whatever. You always have a role in how a relationship pans out, and you need to accept that it's not all on your partner or your ex.
Yeah. And we can, I like that. We can have an impact on it.
Exactly.
So before we close up, then, if you would just tell everyone, I think you did at the beginning, but just where can they meet you? I like to have guests on because I want everyone to know that there are other voices beside me, other folks that do great work. I've known Brad for, 10 years at least. And when someone stays doing a certain area and just refines it and really drills down and cares, I've talked off camera. We spent time at dinner. I forgot where that was. And, if this is something you're going through now, I would highly recommend him. So
Thank you. Thank
it's
you. I
a different
appreciate that,
voice,
Bob.
and I
And
want you to hear just how much he cares and how much he really gets this, because this is what he does all the time. So if you can tell them just a little bit, we're going to put a link down below, whether it's on the podcast or on the YouTube, but just kind of let folks know, please.
I appreciate that, Bob. And yeah, it's funny. People often ask me, you do a lot of breakup coaching. How can you do that? Isn't that awful hearing people's sob stories or. And I say, you know what? I actually love it because even my clients who don't get their ex back, they tend to end up significantly happier and more satisfied, 30 days after we finish working together, uh, regardless of the outcome, because so that's very rewarding. And so I really do enjoy it. And I like to think that I can help a lot of my clients, even if it's not necessarily with exactly what they're after, help them to get to a better place. So if you do want to work with me or learn more, bradbrowning.com, you'll find links to my programs, my coaching, my social media, YouTube channel. And I do recommend YouTube as well. Just search Brad Browning or Breakup Brad, and you'll find me on there. And I'm putting out 2 videos a week right now. So yeah, lots of stuff. And thank you, Bob, for the opportunity to come on. I really appreciate it. It's been great chatting again. You should come on my channel as well. We'd love to have you and get your thoughts on some different things, because I know you have a very female specific expertise that I don't have. So that'd be great to chat another time in the near future.
Oh, I'd like that. All right,
Perfect.
everyone. Be sure and check out Brad Browning. Look for his links and information below. Highly recommend him. Thanks again, Brad. Look forward to next time.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.